Hello everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how to make simple buttons, but also showing you how to make buttons with conditions. This is going to be probably a 1 or 2 part thing here. Haven't fully decided how fast I can make it, but we're pretty much going to make one-line buttons. So anytime you want a button, you could just you could just type one line of code, and then a function that goes along with it that will let you press it. We're going to start out by making a script. We're going to call these button functions. The first one we want to cover, first type function, this is pretty much just going to be like you see your classic functions that show in orange here, like place meeting. This is just something we could substitute in almost as like a folder that holds these we pass arguments to that could just make something super easy. Okay, so we're going to call this one button string, and we're going to do that. So we're going to have button string and button icon, and then we're also going to have button string condition and button string icon. Actually, just for naming, let's do I'm just doing BS for button system. We're going to do button string, just because the rest of the naming stuff would be, with underscores and everything, and BS is just going to be almost like just for this system, that abbreviation will be just for the system if you have it in your game and it gets complicated. So first arguments we want to pass in is X and Y. So where are we wanting this button to be? Next thing is the sprite and sub-image of the button itself. Now we're going to need the string. So what is it going to say? Actually, before we do that, let's do X scale and Y scale. That's just going to be how wide and tall the button is. Then we're going to put string, and then string size, and then just for some more detailed stuff, we're going to do is GUI. So if it's on your GUI draw event, or if it's just on a normal draw event, it's very important when detecting mouse collisions, because the GUI and the draw event are going to be completely different. So, next thing, let's just put the function here. So, that's going to be what happens when I click this. And that's fairly simple. Now, what we want to do... oh, sorry. Jeez, I just woke up recently. First, let's just say var is hover equals false. This is just testing this frame if it's being hovered. Next, we're going to say var size, or I'm going to do sx for size x, and we're going to do x scale, what we passed before, and var size y equals y scale. The reason why we aren't using these that we passed in is because we are going to change these dependent if the button is hovered or not. So now, wait one moment here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so now, before we go any further with this, we're going to need a handler for the button. So we're going to say button handler. Now, what we're going to have here is a hash map or struct for the animation. And animation, I mainly mean smooth scaling and offsets pretty much for the button. So we're just going to say size 1. And honestly, that is all we are going to need right now. Oh, and then also no, just size is fine, actually. Next, we're going to go back into here. And just make sure that you put your button handler in your room somewhere. And I'm also just going to change my room size to 480 by 270, just so everything's easier to see. And I'm also just going to do I'm just going to do menu. This will have all the buttons on it. You can put it anywhere. And now, now that we have the initial scale and hover set, we are going to do actually, one more thing here. On this here, this size, we are going to do step, and we're all going to do anim dot size equals lerp anim dot size to 1 by 0.1. So what this will do is just interpolate the current value of size to go to 1 in 10% increments. So every frame it'll go towards that 10%. So it'll do it fast, then slow, pretty much. Because the closer it is, the slower it'll move. Now, we have that. Now we just want to check if we are in the collision of the button. Now, the whole thing with it is GUI. We're going to need a variable for mouse x. So we're going to actually say mx equals mouse x, my equals mouse y. Now, if is GUI, so if it is, then we're going to say mx equals device mouse x to GUI. And same thing with my mouse y to GUI. There we are. And now we're just going to name this mouse coordinates and then initialize, just to comment everything out. And now check hover. If point in rectangle, and now we're going to do mx, my, because that is the actual mouse coordinates, dependent if it's GUI or not. And then the rectangle is going to be x minus, and now we need to know the x scale. So here's here's another thing here. So sprite size. We're going to need the width of the sprite that we're using in this. So SPR width equals sprite get width. And we're going to input the sprite that we're inputting as the argument. SPR height equals sprite get height SPR. So this will pretty much just return the pixel value of the width of the sprite we are using, which is inputted right here. And the image doesn't matter because it's always going to be using the same width, no matter the subimage. So that is useful because in point and rectangle, that's in pixel scale, while this is in modular scale. How do I put that? So if I put 2 as x scale here, it'll take the width of the sprite multiplied by the x scale. So what we're going to do is multiply by the x scale, and then multiply by the y scale. This will return the pixel amount. So now we could say SPR width divided by 2. And then y minus SPR height divided by 2. And now we're going to do plus SPR width divided by 2. And y plus SPR height divided by 2. Seems very long-winded, but that will get, if we are within the rectangle that the button occupies on the sprite, then this will trigger. So we're going to say is hover equals true, which this will only happen for that one frame. Now what we're going to want to do is if we are hovering it, what am I saying? I'm going to take one moment here, trying to remember. Okay, I've now fully remembered what we're going to be doing. So if we are hovering within this, we're going to say size X. Oh, actually, before we... Yeah, that's actually fine. We're going to say plus equals 0.1. Actually, we're going to say multiply equal 1.1. So it'll add 10% to that value. Actually, no. We're not going to do that. We're going to just add 0.1. So to both of those, add that. And if we're in point and rectangle, we will say... So I'm actually missing one variable here. We're going to need size mod equals, set it to 1. And if we are hovering, we're going to check if instance exists O button handler. And if it does exist, we're going to say size mod equals anim, O button handler dot anim dot size. And this is what we're storing in the button handler in that struct or hash map, whatever you want to call it. We're just going to set it equal to that when we're hovering, just because that will let us do stuff when we click it. So now we're going to do check click if mouse check button pressed MB left. Just a simple click, and you could always change this if you want and add it as an argument for what input you want to do the button, but left click is probably going to be the most common unless you're on controller. And it's going to be a little different, which I will make an input tutorial here somewhat soon, so you can do keyboard and gamepad for controllers. Anyways, I'm getting off track here. So if you click it, we're going to say, same thing here, if instance exists, the button handler, we're going to say, instead of doing size mod equals, we're just going to do this equals 0.8. And that will pretty much shrink the button when we click it, but only when clicked. And then we're going to execute the script or function. So we're going to say script script execute, there it is. And we're going to put function, which is actually this right here for the argument. And that will pretty much run this when we click it. Now, there's not too much more for functionality. We just need to actually visualize the button now. So now, another visualize thing that I like to add is a color change. So pretty much it will set the value of the color to darker if you're not selecting, and it'll be full color if you are hovering over it. I personally like doing it, but it's fully optional. So we're going to say var color equals C light gray. And then right under this, we're going to say if not color change, color equals C white, just to reset it if we want to. And then in here, if we're hovering, we're going to say color equals C white. And that should change the color. Super, super simple. Now we're just going to draw the button. This is the easy part. We're going to say draw sprite ext. And I do have this UI sprite that has a bunch of different colors, and it is centered and also set up with 9 splice. And what this does is lets you stretch the image without distorting any of the pixels. Very, very needed. You just put it to where the center part can be stretched without distorting. You just selected slice center and then just set it to stretch, or you could even do tile. It doesn't matter too much. There's, stretch, repeat, which is tile. Mirror, I wouldn't do any of these top 3, to be honest. Bottom 3, sorry. But the top 2, definitely. Now, we're going to input the sprite, the image, and this is the 9 spliced one I'm talking about that I'll be drawing this with. The X and Y that we decided. The X scale, so instead of saying X scale, we actually stored it as SX. and SY, but we need to multiply this by size mod, and then SY multiplied by size mod. Rotation 0, color, so we stored the color here, and then the alpha, just 1. Next, we're going to do draw text, and before we actually do this, we want to make this easier on ourselves as much as we can. So I'm going to make another script here, and just call this text functions. Because if you're anything like me, I'm not happy with doing the draw text and anything like this. I like making my own called draw text align because I like alignment. So I'm just going to look at the parameters here for draw text. So XY string HV. So horizontal and vertical alignment. Now, this is pretty much just going to do draw text XY string, right? But we're going to say draw set haline. Oopsie, I cannot type today. And this is going to be H draw set valine, so V align V. And then we're just going to go back here and reset to FA left and FA top, which is the default. So now we have that, and we're going to also make align transformed. And now we need to include scale and angle. So we're going to say X scale and Y scale. There we are. And just input these as we go. Just like that. EXT transformed, or transformed EXT. Nope, it's EXT transformed. Just like that. And now string, we still need this, but we need the separation and width. So sep, width, and now we have, oops, I actually put that in the wrong spot. There we are. So that will draw everything with those alignments. So the reason I make those is actually for this button system, makes it so much cleaner, so you don't have to look at all the draw set of haline and valine stuff. I'll do draw text, align transformed, and I will just say X, Y, because that's the location of the button. Now as for X scale, it's going to be a little bit different because we put string size. So we're going to put string size multiplied by size mod. Oop, I'm size mod. There we are. String size multiplied by size mod. Angle, we're going to put 0 just because we don't have a rotation parameter. String, we're going to put string. And then just FA center, FA middle. And that is the button, I believe. So let me just test it out first, unless I forgot something super, super simple. So what we need for every button is a function for the button. You can name this whatever you want. I'm just going to name a button for testing. I'm going to say draw, button string. Oops, I forgot. There it is. BS underscore button underscore string. The X, we're going to do the center of my room in this case. Let me make sure my screen is going to be big enough here. So let me enable this viewport. But you probably already have most of this done. There we are. So 480, 270, perfect. 1280, 720. Now I'm just going to draw this directly in the center of the screen. I'm going to say 240, 135 for the coordinates. SUI border, so that is the sprite of the button. And then the image, I'm just going to use 1, I think that's the blue one. And then for X scale, I'm going to do 3, Y scale 1, so it's going to be wider than it is tall. And then string, I'm going to say button, you know, just simple. Button string size, I'm going to put 0.2. I believe the default text is fairly large, so I'll do that. Is GUI, since I'm in the draw event, it is false. But if I was in draw GUI, you can put true, and that will still work the exact same. Color change, true. Function is going to be button. And make sure you do not put the parentheses, because that will actually crash it. So if we go ahead and run this first try, when we hover over, it does that. When we click, it does that. The function obviously doesn't do anything right now, and it's very hard to read, so we're actually just going to increase. Actually, for one, I need to turn off my interpolate colors between pixels, and we're going to make this button a little bit larger. Let's do 5 and 2, and we're going to do just 1. Let's see how big 1 is. Perfect. Obviously, you'll probably want to use a different font, but that is the basics of a button, and I actually like to have this a little bit faster. So in the button handler, if you want it to be faster, just increase that value. Now it's doing in increments of 20%, so that'll be a bit more snappy. But that is how the buttons work. Now, if I were to go ahead and actually go here and put something in this function for what the button does when clicked, I'm just going to say game end, just to show you that this button does work. Just like that. I clicked it, game ended. Now, there's a couple things that I really want to add, like sound effects. This is my favorite sound effect for buttons. I'm going to go into the button thing here, and I'm going to put sound. So, if you want a sound, you can put the ID of the sound. If not, just put false. And what we're going to do is when you click it, we're going to say sound. If sound is not equal to false, then audio play sound and priority, we're just going to 0, loops, false. That is the simplest way to play the sound. This is saying that it's not supposed to be here, but honestly, it is fine. You don't need to worry about that. Or actually, we'll just put undefined instead. So if you don't want a sound, make sure you specify undefined or -4, and that's in that field. And that should work. Let's see, another thing that I wanted to add is, so when you click the button, I want it to almost turn white for 1 frame. And by that, I mean quite literally like 1 frame. So we're definitely going to need a shader for this one. This one is fully optional. I'm going to call this shade white, and this here, this is just some shader code in GLSLES. I believe that's the version. Not 100% sure, don't quote me. Anyways, I'm going to say vec4 of main, and we're going to input this texture 2D right there. And if main.a, and put these in parentheses, is less than 0.1, then we're going to discard. So that'll pretty much just, it's kind of like a return in a way. But if not, we're going to draw vec4 of 1.0. That will just make everything white. And now if I were to show you here how that actually does do that, I'm just going to say shader set, shade white, shader reset. Hope I did this right. Now if I run this, it should just be, yep, perfectly white. And, yep. Expecting a sound. Oh yeah, I forgot to actually add that parameter here. So if I do S&D click for the sound. Oh, yeah, you can't really tell, but that's because the game ends. But just like that. Now we only want this white to show on the frame we click. So there's a couple ways. I'm going to try it one way just to see if we can not store it if possible. Bar click equals false. And then here we're going to say click equals true. And if click shader set, this should technically do it for that one frame. I don't know if it'll look good enough. Yeah, actually that doesn't look that bad. So when you click it, it flashes white for one frame. And you can definitely see it. But that is the simple button. And now, with the button icon, if you wanted to just have a button that's no text on it, just define nothing as a string. So if I wanted just this button with the sprite, just don't put anything as the string, and it will act the exact same way. Just like that. Now, I did say I wanted to make a button string condition, so we're actually going to copy this. So the condition, all we're going to do is here, before this function, we're going to put condition. And the condition is actually going to be a function again. But while you click, when you click, before it executes a script, if condition, then script execute. Okay, so we're going to change this to condition, and we're going to have this back to game end. And we're just going to call this condition. We're going to pass this into here. I believe this will work. I'm not 100% sure though. So we're going to make a variable just called amount. Let's say money, right? Money equals 10. And we only want to be able to click this button if money is less than 10. Then we're going to say return true and return false at the end if that doesn't return true. So I'm like 50% sure this will work. Very unlikely, but we'll see. I just had this idea pop in my head, but I'll make it work regardless. So we're going to say if keyboard check, because we need a way to remove money. We're going to say if you press E, money minus minus. So that means you'll have 9, which should be enough to trigger the condition. So if I go, oh, okay. I'm going to take one moment to try to figure out what. Okay, I finally figured it out. So before we just had if condition, put those parentheses there and then I'll run it and return a value. So yeah, small little blunder, but that works perfect. So if I go ahead and run this, if I click it, I have 10 money, but I need less than 10. So if I hit E and now I click it, the game ends. So that is button condition. And again, you just input it as a return true and false kind of thing based on parameters within it. That is the basics of the button tutorial. But yes, if you guys want me to cover anything else in this, I could also do sliders and stuff like that in another part. But that will be the basics of buttons. And yeah, anyways, you guys enjoy. and have a good rest of your day.